If you've ever played a video game before, and if you haven't, we strongly suggest you do, you'll know that some have the ability to make us feel things. Many titles can invoke everything from overwhelming joy to unbridled rage all in the space of their short runtimes, and those that bring on the strongest emotions will often have us coming back time and time again. That is, of course, unless they're so devastatingly bleak that they leave you feeling completely empty inside. For this list, we're looking at games that are so harrowing players won't feel it necessary to play them for a second time. And fair warning, we may be entering spoiler territory on some of these titles, so keep that remote handy in case we cover a game you haven't played yet. It's also worth noting that whilst we will do our best to keep things fairly light, we will be touching on one or two difficult topics, so if at any point you feel like you need to switch off, then we completely understand. We've also left some helpful contacts in the description box below if you're struggling. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 hard-hitting video games you won't play more than once. Number 10. Heavy Rain. Regardless of how you feel about Heavy Rain, i.e. whether you think it's daft or a masterpiece, you have to agree that the game has some harrowing moments and tough choices to make. Following the death of his eldest son, sad dad Ethan Mars is put to the test when the origami killer abducts his other son, Sean. The origami killer is a serial murderer that kidnaps young kids in order to test their father's love, only revealing the kids' whereabouts after the fathers have completed a number of trials. In Ethan's case, these range from driving against traffic at high speed to poisoning himself. Though the game admittedly has its flaws, it poses its audience a very tough question. Just how far would you go to save someone that you love? It's easy enough to cut off fingers of a bunch of pixels on a screen, but if you really reflect on it, do you think you'd be able to bring yourself to do it? Even when you're not selecting bits of Ethan to get the chop, Heavy Rain deals with some rather dark subject matter. And we're not saying that, thanks to the backstory the game presents, we ended up feeling a bit sorry for the origami killer. Actually, we definitely are. Heavy Rain made us feel sorry for a child killer. I hope David Cage is happy. Number 9. The Last of Us. We'll say one thing about 2013's The Last of Us, it doesn't pull any punches when it comes to the emotional stuff. 15 minutes in, boom! Big sads. From there, the game doesn't really let up. 20 years after the events of the prologue, protagonist Joel continues to survive in a society ravaged by the mutant cordyceps infection that turns humans into aggressive zombie-like creatures. Whilst working as a smuggler, he and his partner are offered a large cache of weapons in return for escorting a young girl, Ellie, out of the quarantine zone. As one might expect from a game of the post-apocalyptic persuasion, there is an awful lot of heartache, and many sacrifices have to be made in order to ensure that Ellie makes it to her intended destination. We won't spoil the ending, that would just be rude, but what we will say is that you will come away from The Last of Us feeling somewhat conflicted about the whole thing. The Last of Us is a wonderful game, and if you haven't played it already, we highly recommend you do. It's a rough ride from beginning to end. Number 8. Spec Ops: The Line. Those unfamiliar with Spec Ops: The Line might write the game off as little more than a Call of Duty clone. Though it is set in the midst of a conflict, those who have played the game will tell you that you don't walk away from it feeling like there are any heroes. Spec Ops: The Line follows Captain Martin Walker as he is sent into a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai on a recon mission. Things start out very Team America, but it's not long before everything becomes a bit more 1917, with all the death and the carnage and such. Ultimately, Spec Ops: The Line makes its audience feel incredibly guilty for doing as it says, but that's the whole point. The game is a reflection on the true horrors of war and the impacts it has on individual soldiers who are often left paralyzed by remorse for the things they've been told to do by their superiors. Obviously, playing Spec Ops: The Line isn't really anything like experiencing the actual atrocities those in active war zones are faced with. It is, however, powerful enough to keep you thinking about all of the awful things you've done throughout its runtime long after the credits have rolled. Number 7. Papers, Please. On the surface, Papers, Please seems like a fun little way to pass a few hours with a spot of border bureaucracy, but get just a little way into it and you'll find that it's actually a fairly bleak commentary on doing what is right versus doing what you're told. Set in the fictional Eastern Bloc-like country of Arstotzka, Papers, Please tasks players with vetting those trying to get into the country. As the days go by, the rules change and become more complex, and so players will need to stay on the ball to ensure that those trying to enter have the right documentation. Any infractions lead to lost income, and since you earn a pittance as it is, you really can't afford to make any mistakes. The only problem is that several of the people who wish to cross the border don't have the correct documentation, but have really good reasons for wanting to enter the country. Are you going to deny a woman the chance to be with her husband? Or are you going to risk your day's wages, potentially preventing your sick family members from getting the medication they need? It's certainly not a choice I'd ever want to be faced with. Number 6. This War of Mine. We've already touched on the devastating impacts of war from the perspective of the military, but things get just as harrowing, if not more so, for those innocent bystanders that end up caught in the middle of it all. A game that explores this is This War of Mine, a 2014 title in which players must survive as a civilian in an active war zone. By day, they are unable to leave their shelter as the area is covered by snipers, so must spend their time crafting what they can. At night, the threat of sniper fire is gone, however that doesn't mean safety for those who venture out to gather supplies. Throughout the game, players will encounter other survivors and will find themselves faced with a number of difficult choices. Being the hero could get you killed, but how are you supposed to live with yourself if your actions might mean death for someone else? What makes the game all the more upsetting is knowing that it was inspired by real events, and all of the horrible decisions that players are forced to make are ones that real people have had to come to terms with. Though you may survive the game, you certainly won't feel like you've won. Number 5. Limbo. Limbo is a great example of a game that disturbs its audience more with what it doesn't show them than with what it does. In terms of gameplay, players control a small boy who awakens on the edge of hell. As with most platformers, he must run from one side of the screen to the other, climbing over obstacles and doing what he can to avoid the numerous enemies. One of the many things that Limbo is really good at is invoking a sense of isolation and overall dread in its audience. The art style is minimalistic, presenting the game's events entirely in shades of grey, invoking memories of those shadowlight boxes made from paper that are, for some reason, slightly creepy, no matter what they depict. Aside from the odd environmental noise, the sound is all but non-existent, and every other creature you come across either wants to kill you or run away from you. If you do take 4 or so hours out of your day to play Limbo, you'll get to experience a wonderfully artistic game that might just leave you feeling empty inside. Don't worry though, that feeling will go away soon enough, hopefully. James has been staring into space for 4 hours since he played it, but we're sure that won't happen to you too. Number 4. The Walking Dead. We've come across a number of games so far in this list that force players to make a few hard choices, but The Walking Dead is absolutely chock full of difficult decisions that can have horrible consequences. Like the comic books and TV show, Telltale's The Walking Dead tells a number of very human stories against the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. The game's main protagonist is Lee, a former university professor who is being escorted to prison as the infection breaks out. Whilst fleeing from walkers, he comes across 8-year-old Clementine hiding in a treehouse, and together they set out to try and survive the vicious hordes of reanimated dead. Not only is the player faced with a series of horrible choices, which oftentimes end with the death of one or more beloved characters, but there are also several events within the game that the player has no control over that are traumatic all by themselves. I mean, we know the odds are against these characters, but surely it's not all doom and gloom in the zombie apocalypse, right? Seriously, if you can't make it through the entire game without shedding a tear, then I can only assume you're some sort of soulless android or similar. Number 3. What Remains of Edith Finch. The emergence of the walking simulator in recent years has given rise to a number of hard-hitting, narrative-driven games, though few are quite as impactful as 2017's What Remains of Edith Finch. The game follows the protagonist, whose identity is not revealed until the end of the game, as they travel to a small island carrying the journal of Edith Finch. At the time of writing the journal, Edith was 17 years old and the last surviving member of her family. Through her memories, the game paints a picture of a family beset by an alleged curse, one that ensures that they will all suffer untimely deaths. Looking on as the family meets their fates one by one is utterly heartbreaking. Many try to escape or break the supposed curse, but it quickly becomes apparent that there's no way around it, and the player is ultimately powerless to help. As tragic as the tale of the Finch family is, it is beautifully told through a series of vignettes depicting the death of each. It's a tough game to sit through, and definitely isn't one that anyone's going to want to replay in a hurry, but it's worth it for the experience of such a well-crafted story. Number 2. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. If you aren't a person that suffers from a mental illness, then it can be hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone who does. That's not to take anything away from those who do their best to support people with mental health issues, of course. You guys are the MVPs. There are certain pieces of media, however, that do a really good job of approximating the experience of having a mental illness, and an incredibly good example of a video game that does this is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. The game follows picked warrior Senua as she embarks on a quest to save the soul of her deceased lover Dylan. Senua is plagued by voices in her head that she believes to be those of spirits and that she is cursed to hear them. What's actually going on, however, is that Senua is suffering from psychosis, a condition that's often underrepresented or poorly portrayed in the media. The developers took the time to work with experts on the illness, and the result is a video game experience that's nothing short of haunting. When played with headphones, the many voices heard by Senua start to swim around the player's head, giving them a terrifying glimpse into what the young woman is going through. Number 1. That Dragon: Cancer. Cancer is a devastating disease, putting sufferers and their loved ones through absolute hell. The pain of seeing someone go through the traumatic experience is incredibly tough, and the anguish felt by friends and family members is unimaginable to those that haven't experienced it. That Dragon Cancer tells the story of Joel Green, a little boy who was sadly diagnosed with terminal cancer when he was only 12 months old. The game was written and designed by Joel's parents, Amy and Ryan Green, and presents the highs and lows of Joel's short life from when they learned of his condition right through to his death in March 2014. Players take on the role of Joel's parents and are invited to explore the couple's memories of raising their son. The game focuses on exploration, allowing players to interact with various characters and make choices, as Amy and Ryan had to. It isn't really a video game in the traditional sense, but is more of an interactive, abstract memoir. That Dragon Cancer is incredibly hard to play, but most who have made it through the game are glad that they did. As painful as it is, those who have known someone that's dealt with cancer are likely to find that the game resonates with them, and though it isn't a title that many will want to play more than once, it's one that's worth braving nonetheless.